course, with Detroit so much in the news in terms of its revitalization and so forth, it seemed like only natural that we should be focusing on Detroit, partly in terms of the problems with access to the internet with less than half of the population online, and also the fact that there's a lot of ways in which the internet could support the revitalization of Detroit. And so we want to begin learning more and more about what's going on in Detroit, and Garlin Gilchrist seemed to be one of the first people we should invite to talk to. And we thank you very much for speaking to us and giving us some background. And Kate Hartman also was very helpful in sort of identifying how to get started in learning more about developments in Detroit. So we've asked Garlin Gilchrist to be one of our first speakers and organize our first seminar in Detroit. And so it's a momentous day for us, but also the day in which net neutrality is going to be announced and municipal broadband is going to be announced. So there's something, the stars are aligned.
Right.
The stars are aligned. So I think this is going to be somehow a good omen for the project. Garlin is the Deputy Technology Director for Civic and Community Engagement, which I don't know if there's another job like that anyway. Maybe that's
Not with a title as long.
That's a very long title.
That's a lot of title.
So it's a unique position and a real challenging role. He was previously at MoveOn.org, so real mobilizing people in across the U.S. and now mobilizing people in Detroit, and I think it's a great idea. And so we're hoping we'll learn from you about what the city is doing in this space in terms of civic engagement.
No, seriously, I think this is really important thinking and work that you guys are embarking upon here. You know, I have been very interested and passionate about Detroit since growing up here, and specifically around the different ways that connectivity can lead to, you know, great relationships, great opportunities for as many Detroiters as possible. When I say connectivity, I mean that both in like the, you know, analog, prehistoric, meeting people in different places and connecting with them on a human level, as well as from a digital perspective in terms of like connectivity to different opportunities, connectivity to the internet, connectivity to technology more broadly. And so while I do have formal training as an engineer and am able to speak that language, I approach this or try to think about this much more holistically than that, because I think by limiting your solution space to technology, it sort of limits the types of things you can do and how accessible those solutions can be. Now, having said that, my job with the city of Detroit is to focus on some of the ways that technology can be helpful in the city's reimagination of itself, in the city's ability to be a great partner with its citizens, with its businesses, with organizations that are housed within the city and that are interested in doing work in and around the city. Technology can be a really great conduit for it. The foundation of that partnership, from my perspective and from the perspective of our Chief Information Officer, Beth Niblock, who's my boss, is really opening up the city's books and arms and systems to be more visible and accessible to more people, to really have it such that everyone can get insight into how the city of Detroit does business, how it operates, and really what those business activities are. So that cornerstone actually launched, it's 12 o'clock. That cornerstone launched a week ago today, but it was at 1 o'clock a week ago, where Mayor Duggan signed an executive order that created an open data policy for the city of Detroit. For those who don't know, what that means is it essentially made it so that access to city information, documents, etc., operational data, would no longer be only available to the sophisticated few who knew how to navigate the Freedom of Information Act process. We were now going to begin in an ongoing effort to make as much city data as legally possible available to people without them having to apply for it, specifically ask for it, or pay for it. And The first demonstration of that policy change was what we call an open data portal that we launched last Thursday as well. It's available at data.detroitmi.gov. It's visible here on the screen. This is the homepage for it. You can see things, information about public safety in your neighborhood. You can see information about building and construction and permitting activity in your neighborhood. You can see maps that can tell you, answer questions, everything from where's the closest park to where's the closest library. You can see a map of where all the Detroit public school locations are. You can see things around maps for election precincts, all sorts of data and information. You can see one of the most fundamental documents of the city is a parcel map that actually shows all of the different property parcels in the city of Detroit, who owns them, is it taxable? These are all public information that previously was very difficult to get, and really only a reporter who knew how to navigate the process, or some very sophisticated folks at a select few of organizations really knew how to get to that stuff. And so we're making it easy. We're basically democratizing access to that information. One of the core inequities that I see present in a lot of places, but I think is uniquely present in Detroit, is access to information is power. Access to high quality information is power. Quick and easy access to information is a form of power. How that power is inequitably distributed can lead to misperception. So for example, if you feel like, let's say I want to start a business, and I feel like my competition has better relationships at the city and they can better navigate the business licensing process. That means they can possibly get their business off the ground faster, they can get their product or services to market faster. If they can navigate some personal relationship, that creates an inequity between me and this competition. However, if we're able to make that process completely transparent and open, and then so that anyone who wants to start a business could have access to it, then now they're more competing on their ideas, their products, and their services versus who knew a guy, who knew a guy, who knew a lady, who knew how to do something. That is, by dealing with that information asymmetry, is one way that we can deal with the inequitable opportunities that may present themselves across the city. So we're trying to get out front and to reduce that asymmetry by putting out more information, as the city specifically, putting out authoritative, actual, true public information that you can trust from the city of Detroit. We want to put it out in this data portal, and then as we go on, now that this is launched and as we're putting more stuff out there, we're going to integrate this sort of information push effort into more and more city operations. So where city locations, city places of business, places everything like the Northwest Activity Center, for example, will have access to this information for people to be able to come and answer questions or ask questions about stuff, and people will be trained to answer them based off of data that's in this portal. So we see this as foundational. This dealing with this information asymmetry, this dealing with this equitable access to information is really a foundational element to addressing all sorts of inequity on all sorts of levels that may present itself in the city of Detroit. Now, from the perspective of this project of the Quello Center, this type of information sharing is really at the heart of collaboration. I think it's been very difficult in the past to build these sorts of partnerships with the city of Detroit because it wasn't clear how to do it. It wasn't clear who to talk to. It wasn't clear, where to start if you wanted to reach out to the city because you needed help or support or partnership in something. So one thing this effort is about as well is how do we make it so that the city of Detroit is a more flexible, capable partner for all sorts of efforts, whether that's business interests we're interested in business open in the city of Detroit, businesses are interested in open in the city of Detroit, we want to be a good partner for that. Organizations that are doing great research about Detroit, like the Quello Center, we want to be able to feed you official information that can complement the other data and information that you're gathering. We also want to use the government's power to convene to be a really great partner, such that, okay, if you need help with introductions to other entities or people that we may know through other means, we can help facilitate that. Detroit's reimagination will be incomplete if it's only driven by the government. It'll also be incomplete if it's only driven by the research and academic community. It'll also be incomplete if it's only driven by the private sector. All of these different entities need to come together empowered and informed by citizens who live and work in this city to be able to really fully reimagine this city in a truly equitable way. And we really think that this type of effort is at the heart of it. So I guess the other point that I'd like to make is I'm really encouraged by the attention that I've seen being paid by different research and academic institutions to different facets of the city's recovery. Because I think we need as many eyes on from as many angles as possible to make sure that we're not missing stuff. And so, I'm always going to be open to that sort of collaboration and understanding. I want to be aware of the types of questions that you have. I'm interested in looking at how our data overlaps with things you care about. So, for example, I would love to know if city data that we're able to capture around are places where we have increased building permitting activity. Are those also places where we have increased voter participation? Are places where we see an influx of recent residents or recent home purchases? Like, how does that correlate to public safety activity in terms of fire and police and EMS in those neighborhoods? Like, I can put that data out there. I need research partners and smart people to make those sorts of connections and conclusions and correlations. It also will help me prioritize the types of things that people care about, that people want to know. So in addition to working with the academic community, we're also going to be doing a series of events around the city. We're going to basically ask citizens, here's what we know, tell us what you know, tell us what you want to know from us. Already on the data portal, we've gotten many requests for new data sets that they want to see published. Everything from, city contracts to stuff from our fire department and everywhere in between. That to me has shown that people have a hunger for knowing more stuff about their city, which to me means at a basic level, they define citizenship as better understanding of the place that they live and the place that they work or the place that they vote, et cetera. And so any way that we can further support someone's definition of citizenship with more information, understanding, and relationship about the place that they live and care about, that's a win for us. And I think that data and technology can help serve that purpose. It's not the easiest work. We have city systems that are very difficult to open up because they were not designed with the public in mind. They were designed to service the employees of the government that work there, that work on them on a day-to-day basis. And so as we upgrade systems, though, this is a requirement that we're making for all new systems that we acquire, that they have a component, that they are compliant. They're basically open data compliant. They're able to have appropriate public information syndicated to the public. And so this will only get easier going forward. We're just in the beginning of it now. So, as hiccups occur, which they undoubtedly will, and they'll be my fault, but we'll be able to deal with them. And we believe that sort of acting in good faith and going out there and putting this foot forward, we hope is, our step towards, like I said, what's important to me, which is building relationship, deepening relationship with as many people, as many entities, as many businesses, as many partner governments as possible. That's important to us that's important to us in terms of how we can truly, holistically, and equitably reimagine our city.
Very good. Okay.
There you go.
I guess I'm here sort of as a civic technologist. I've been covering Civic Tech recently, writing a lot of articles to try to articulate what's going on and hopefully offer a shared definition. But when I started covering Civic Tech, I definitely did so not as an expert, but more because I saw a problem. And so, yes, I'm a technologist, and yes, I'm very interested in civic things, but I'm primarily a communicator, and what I saw was a communication problem. So I am an information designer. I design complex information. I've done a lot of health information design with low literate audiences, nationally and internationally, and then I've most recently started focusing on data visualization. So I really feel that design can be a translation tool to help different communities build consensus, or at least at a minimum share information. So to backtrack, there are some incredible civic tech projects that are happening in Detroit, happening mostly at the grassroots. And some are receiving national and international attention, but not necessarily receiving the coverage locally. And so that what I saw was, you know, a communication gap. There are communities that are not necessarily seeing each other, and so how do we get everyone sort of talking about a shared ecosystem or a shared group of actors and organizers? So I use these articles sort of as a platform to first kind of define our emerging ecosystem, and then also kind of celebrate and honor and raise the profile of some really exciting projects within it, and in hopes that we can kind of build a shared vocabulary of how everything works together. Sort of through that process, Garlin approached me to help articulate and map the civic tech ecosystem. The point is to show organizations, they're sort of all arranged around the edge, are the organizations by sort of activity or major activity. That's what the colors mean. And then the projects that have actually been sort of produced are in the middle. And so the idea is to highlight collaboration and also see like what is emerging. But also what, in terms of like a basic analysis, the light blue refers to data projects, open data projects. And I think that what I sort of came to the conclusion of is that data is sort of like this proto raw material that the ecosystem is using to kind of get started. And so I think what's really exciting about the government data portal is it's just going to provide more raw material and food for the ecosystem. And so hopefully this will sort of start, we'll see emerging projects as well. I also buy into design thinking. I have an MFA. I'm a designer by trade, and I do believe in interdisciplinary teams and iterating through projects and products and working with very specific audiences. There's sort of a civic tech mantra of build with communities, not for communities, so I definitely buy into that. And I think arranging this map along conceptual ideas or processes hopefully allows us to kind of identify ways that projects would be produced, if that makes sense. So as a metaphor, I've been at the Do It office with Garlin on a fellowship, and I've been working on visualizing government data in the portal. And we've been sort of cleaning and scrubbing data through this really fascinating tool called the Safe FME. And I don't know if you have any way to articulate, but I see it as like a Rube Goldberg machine for scrubbing data. And it's like visually, it's very appealing to me because I'm definitely a visual learner. And it allows us to kind of line up all these processes for the data to get into Socrata. And I kind of am thinking of this map as with all these different concepts and processes that have been laid out that we can kind of break them apart and figure out, you know, what's the order of operations to produce additional projects. So I guess my opinions that I would sort of offer to the ecosystem build out is that it requires resources, diversity, tech training, and then organizing and outreach. Those are sort of 4 critical components that I see. So in terms of resources, of course, civic technologists should be out there in the trenches building out the ecosystem like it's their job, but it would be better if it was actually part of their job. And so I think finding with Garlin on our side, I think we have a resource on the government side that's very civic-minded and wants to build out this ecosystem. But how do we do that through nonprofits as well? I don't know if it's one job or if it's a lot of organizations, nonprofits, seeing the importance of civic-minded projects and civic tech-minded projects and kind of making space for that, you know, maybe a citywide committee or, you know, there should be bigger conversations, I think. And I do think that the open data portal is going to be very key and will be the foundation for a lot of new civic startups and programs, but they'll also need mentorship and training, and so finding ways to strategically catch those within the community will be important, but that will likely require some sort of resource. And diversity. So as a metaphor, ecosystems need diversity to evolve and grow. And so just keeping in mind to age, residents and non-residents, I think is an important dynamic that the city is dealing with right now. Race and ethnicity, gender and sexuality. How do we get very diverse interdisciplinary groups? What people studied and what people specialize in is also a very important part of that diversity. And how do we bring people together to produce really good products that are focused on the community. Tech training, we definitely need to work on capacity at most of our levels throughout the city. I do really believe that data, code, and then software and hardware are essential, but I'm a big believer in STEAM education, so science, technology, engineering, and math with arts infusion. That's definitely the way I learned how to teach myself how to do the various tech things that I do. And so makerspaces, I think, are a really great hands-on way for students to get introduced to ideas that may seem really abstract, but actually build out the entire world around them. And then, of course, organizing and outreach I see as sort of the glue that holds the whole ecosystem together and keeps any sort of momentum that we've built up moving forward. And I would also say that you should never underestimate the power of a good facilitator. So even if you're not necessarily a technologist, like, you need people that help bring a room together and have a real conversation. And that is it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other quick questions before we move to our second respondent? Okay, but could I just, what do you define civic tech? No, civic tech, you use that a lot, but what's not civic tech, or what's civic tech?
Well, I think that, so I think there's like a lot of attention right now paid to startups within Detroit. Like, we're very, very focused on entrepreneurs and innovation. But I think paying attention to what is the end product and how that benefits the community, I think that's a conversation that I think should be more focused on, I guess.
Okay, I got it. Okay, Professor Kruman.
Hi. Thank you. That was terrific. I think that the Open Data Project is absolutely fantastic. There's no question that at the foundation of citizenship, and I would define it as broadly as you do, requires information, knowledge. And it's out of that it's not just the knowledge, but the knowledge also builds trust in government. In a way that Detroit city government has both deservedly earned distrust, and also with archaic technology that undermined anyone's access. What you're doing is fantastic, because at one of the core ingredients, I know that be measuring it in the Civic Health Index report, involves trust in government. Knowledge will breed conversation at the family table, and not just in civic startups, but in churches, at PTA, and it's those kinds of opportunities that I think you're providing that will be absolutely fantastic. I think it provides a foundation for advocacy and activism. Will we need facilitators, as Kat suggests? And the answer emphatically is yes. It's one of the roles that the Citizenship Center actually plays in fostering conversations and discussion of citizenship. At Wayne State, though, there are a lot of non-tech civic startups that also need to be in some way, and maybe digitally, connected. For example, Wayne State just received a major grant from the Kresge Foundation. It went to Sheila Cockrell, the former
Oh, yeah.
city councilwoman, and Irv Reed, former president of Wayne State, for their Citizen Detroit project. And that is an incredibly local, old school project to engage community leaders. And I'm kind of talking to to my panelists, I apologize. It's very exciting, but I think that to connect to the data and to connect perhaps to people who are involved in civic technology, that it has the potential to leverage what they're doing. I think they need collaborators, but it also may be that you need these very old-fashioned facilitators. And so I think that these are some of the kinds of opportunities that we have. But the other part that I would just call attention to without having an answer to it is, how do we engage the disengaged? And that the disengaged are not only disengaged because they don't have faith in government. And I don't have an answer, but the students who either don't get through high school or get through high school and don't go on to college. I know the Spencer Foundation has been deeply interested in figuring out ways to encourage civic engagement among those who don't go to college, when all the research points to higher education as a crucial variable in civic engagement and in voting behavior, and just participation in the public sphere. So I think that the data and the knowledge that you're going to provide is going to be absolutely essential. How it's used and how it is used broadly across the city and across the metropolitan area. Because as parenthetical comment, I think that by making the city government as transparent as you aim to, it also holds out the prospect for building much greater regional cooperation. And I think that in itself is going to be huge. Now, I'll just put in a couple of very brief plugs for the Center for the Study of Citizenship. On March 12th through 14th, we'll be holding our annual international conference. We have scholars coming from all over the world. And appropriate for this discussion is that our theme is going to be on governance and citizenship. And we have scholars coming from Hong Kong, South Africa, all over Europe, Israel, Jordan, and it will connect to a book series that we're going to be launching with the Wayne State Press also in March. But there are going to be presenters addressing issues of communication and citizenship, and governance. The second is that I'd like to be able to connect, because the center has a corporate citizenship initiative to build effectively business citizenship into the early DNA of businesses, so that, and we're about to launch a survey, and there might be opportunities there for collaboration as well.
Sure.
So I thank you for the work you're doing. I think it is absolutely essential to rebuilding democracy in the city of Detroit. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do want to say one thing in response to Professor Kruman, and it's that's you know, there's a range of approaches that could be taken to this sort of transparency effort, and you know, one of our goals was to try to put out, you know, you could think of it as sort of low-level data, if you will, in the sense that like data on, rather than having aggregated totals of building permitting activity, like actually putting out like these are the individual permits that were released. The reason for that approach gets to something that you alluded to, which was that I have no idea how people are gonna chop, screw, remix, use this type of stuff. No idea. I like to think that I'm intelligent and I can think of like a handful of ways that I expect people to use it, but the reality is like it's going to be utilized in ways that we could have never dreamed of. But in order to make sure that that possible set of uses is as wide as it could be, is to make sure that we're putting out basically as raw of data as possible. Because to the extent that we were to aggregate or obfuscate information, that would by definition limit its possible uses. And so I think by putting out stuff at the level that we're attempting to put it out, we hopefully can enable people to be more creative and just more, and broaden the potential uses for that information. Because, you know, the more that people want to utilize this stuff, you know, the more it challenges us to put more out there. And I think the better that will be because of it. Because the other thing that comes with this is feedback, right? I got people already contacting me and or reaching out through the portal saying, yeah, this was not quite right. This one is, but not that one, or whatever. Like, here's a better way to think about that. Like, it's really started to engage or begin a conversation about how does this work. It also gives people insight into the systems that are currently servicing them now. So I'm really encouraged by what that can do as far as, again, just helping people deepen their relationship with the city. The mayor was pretty clear in the press event, like, this is about rebuilding trust. This is about trying to demonstrate that we are doing business differently. And one aspect of that difference is we are going to do more business out in the open. You know, we're going to show and prove. It's different, and this is how you know it's different, because you can see it.
That's excellent. And I also like, you seem to have a very clear vision of this as a long process. It's going to take years.
Yes.
And that this is a start. But
Yeah.
you need to start creating this virtuous cycle.
Yeah, totally. You know, this. You know, I mean, it's a small step, right? We started with 9 city agencies. It is not even all the information within those 9 agencies, right? So there's plenty of problem space, if you will, for us to deal with. Plenty of it.
I wonder, because of this, it's an issue of citizen engagement, but also because the focus currently is on, you know, opening up city data so that can actually fuel Civic Tech and other things. But there's also the idea of going to where people are engaging. So like going to Twitter or going to social media.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if, well, again, you can only do so many things at once, but I think have you thought about, like, say, mining Twitter data to see what citizens are concerned about, or looking at social media to say what's being discussed or trending about the city that we should be aware of? Or
Yeah. So, I mean, it is true that, you know, we do our best to pay attention to the types of conversations happening around the city, both as a location, but then also around the subject of Detroit and different aspects of what we're doing. I think that can always be deepened. and can always get better. And there's plenty of work to get that better. You know, I would say that we want to get to a point where people do feel like they can reach out on different topics, you know, or with different questions to the city, and feel like they can get a legitimate answer from us online or in social media or whatever. Like, I think that we want to get to that point. It's still a work in progress to get to that point. But I think that truly, if part of the point of the government is to deliver services, those services need to be delivered to citizens when and where they ask for them, right? And so, to the extent that, you know, more and more citizens continue to ask for those things in social media, we need to deliver them there. I mean, one concrete instance of, this isn't a social media thing, but like, you know, more than half the people that visited the City of Detroit's website came to it from a mobile phone.
Oh,
Up until State of the City was 2 Tuesdays ago. Up until 2 Tuesdays ago, if you tried to access the City of Detroit's website on your mobile phone, detroitmi.gov, it would make you cry. And so we embarked upon a full redesign of the website that, among other things, made it completely 100% usable from a cell phone. So that's just an example of, like, citizens come to look for bus schedules at the City Trust website, and they do it from their cell phone. So we need to make that really easy to do. So we did that. So taking that same thinking and applying it to how do we make the right information or the right services available through other mediums like social media, like, we need to do that. We need to do more of that too. So that's, again, just like the data project, this is step 0. Like, this is just the beginning of that. But we're hoping we're going in the right direction now.
I mean, just to reinforce that, I was at a conference of government data, well, people doing applications for citizens in the UK, and they started a policy of mobile first.
Right.
That is literally they assume that's going to be the first portal that people are using. It's quite a
That's
shift.
correct. That's even more true in other parts of the world than it is in the United States. So that makes a lot of sense.
That's a good idea.
Are you finding that more people are on mobile devices? Maybe you would be the.
So I can just speak to, so in terms of how people engage with the city via the internet, the answer is emphatically yes. And I do know that, I mean, I've seen some statistics on, like, mobile phone, or more specifically on, like, smartphone penetration in the city of Detroit being, like, north of 70%. I don't know if you got more to elaborate.
I don't have any specific data points, but I would say that just based on, like, broadband numbers and internet access numbers, we can pretty much say that it's either outside the home or happening on the phone, where internet access is primarily occurring. So, and a lot of, you know, SMS and texting is still really essential as a technology too in the city. So yeah, smartphones and mobile ready and SMS, I think, are essential.
Absolutely.
And that enables all sorts of collective intelligence kinds of identifying an abandoned home or something like that.
Absolutely.
It becomes a whole new dimension of citizen involvement.
Absolutely. I would love. If I get to dream for a little bit, right? I mean, I would love to, for example, now again, if we've laid this foundation of data availability via this portal, right? Then, like, how can you think about different interfaces to that portal? One of them is this in-person interface to that portal. If I'm sitting there talking to a person that could search for something, whatever, I want to know what's up with this house on my block. Okay, tell me your street name, and I will tell you what we know about that block, right? Similarly, I would love for there to be, very basic, a basic SMS interface to that portal, right? Hey, I am driving here and I see a house being knocked down. Am I sure that they, like, have permission to do that? Can I text the address and, like, find out if there's a demolition permit for that?
That would be great. Yeah.
You know, man, that house is really messed up. Like, I really hope the Land Bank Authority is going to knock that down sometime. So right now, like, we have a data set that shows you all the houses that Detroit Land Bank Authority is going to knock down between now and May 1st. Right? So you could, like, text an address, see if it's in there.
Yeah.
I would love to get to that point. That's another interface on top of that foundation.
Yeah.
That's an interface that may be more appropriate. We're talking about technology, right? Like there's like cool technology, there's technology that people ain't ready for yet, then there's appropriate technology, right? Like SMS is a squarely appropriate technology to deploy in the city of Detroit. So like how can we be smart about doing that? That's stuff like that. I mean, that's the point we want to get to, that I think we get a chance to think about once we feel like our foundation is solid. So
Yeah, one thing I noticed too, like mapping is a technology that's utilized really heavily in the city, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's digital mapping. So a lot of, I mean, the big purple projects are mostly about maps, and a lot of it is like literally bringing a parcel map to communities and having them write on it and correct on it right there within the meeting. I mean, land use is a really big issue right now, and so it makes sense that mapping is like a digital and analog technology that's used a lot. So appropriate, is the key term I was building off of.
We should begin to wind up, but I wanted to ask if, I mean, I think one way of outreach or communicating this is if you have some good examples or like home runs, that whether it's a citizen story or a project that, and obviously the open data project is one where you have a very concrete success in terms of opening up this data, but are there spin-offs from that? Well, it's too soon, but do you have some success stories that would be?
I mean, I'm very partial to Allied Media Project's Digital Stewards Program, which is doing outreach and training, and also building digital internet access at the same time. So the project essentially trains community groups to build their own wireless mesh networks. So these are decentralized internet networks that they can actually, host things on their own site and server, and have a whole community-based software, if they want to build very specific apps. So they've got the wireless mesh networks up, and they've done outreach to involve organizations to kind of look after them and take care of them, and now they're in the process of trying to get apps built to put on them. So it's evolving.
I have a question about that. One thing that is on my mind when it comes to social media and technology and inequity is the small businesses that have been in the city for a very, very, very long time, who might have people in leadership who don't use the internet at all.
Right.
I can think of one or two off the top of my head that I just know of: restaurants, health food stores, things that I personally look for, that I'm like, okay, I pass this intersection, 20 times a day. I go on the internet and look for health food stores across the city all the time, and I find one in Ferndale and two in Detroit,
Right.
And so I guess I'm wondering if you know of anything in place to kind of train small business owners, people who've been around for a while, as far as, how they explain to them how important it is to get online, and then also.
I sound like a broken record, but Allied Media is really doing some fascinating things. The program that is not really functioning anymore, but Detroit Future Media was this great, they actually paid people to take media classes, so they learned design skills, web development, video, what else? Just a wide range of technical digital skills, and a lot of these, like there were some small business owners that participated, but they also helped place the students, but they were students of all ages. Like it was definitely a wide range of students within small businesses throughout the city to sort of build up from the grassroots technical capacity too. So even if it wasn't the owner, it was hopefully spreading out some of that skill. But they don't have any resources, right? The funding ended, so.
Okay.
But that was a great example.
It's a real problem. I mean, just internationally, I think, like regulators tend to be focused on citizens or consumers, but sort of leave out business, or leave out, assuming business takes care of itself, but small, medium-sized enterprises and the various small businesses, many just don't realize if you're not online, you don't exist.
You don't exist. I mean, to some
Yeah.
people, you just don't exist.
Sure.
And hotels or bed and breakfast, people won't stay there if they don't have access to
Reviews
Wi-Fi or something.
Sure.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, why, and,
yeah.
yes,
Sure.
and be on the reviews, yes.
Yeah, that's very true.
So it's a really good point.
Mhm.
You know, I think there is some programming if I keep my government hat on. So like there's a really interesting program that's launching this spring called Motor City Match, which is an effort from the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation and some other partners, where they're essentially matching people who have like small or medium-sized storefront space that they own to match them with either existing or new business persons to need that space. And as part of that matchmaking process, there's also a set of sort of wraparound sort of services and support that go to the business owners, part of which is working on their technical capacity. So for example, you know, if you do have you want to open up new dry cleaners or something like that, like in addition to helping you find space to, like a physical space to put that dry cleaner, there may be other sort of capacity building that can happen associated with that matchmaking process. So like, you know, this is the beginnings of that program this spring, but it's one example of, at least just off the top of my head, I can think of someone that's trying to think about what you think about, because I think that's really real in terms of wanting to just raise the like baseline of understanding of the potential benefits of this stuff for you as a business person. Wanting to raise that across the entire city, not just businesses that are, you know, in this neighborhood, but businesses that's out like a 7 Mile Mile, right? Wanting to make sure that those folks have access to those kind of services and that kind of training and that kind of capacity building is really important. It's critically important for us to have I think a thriving and, you know, robust business community throughout the city.
Yeah.